Introduce this crazy declassified gateway process report.
It was written in 1983. It came out of Fort Meade. Basically, he was tasked to see if the gateway process is valid. Does it work? It's amazing as you read this because it's so dense with, meditation and kundalini energy and how you can achieve these different levels of scientific breakdown of toroidal fields and what the holographic, matrix is. The take home from that, yes, it works, and that we can separate our consciousness from our physical body, that body can transcend space and time. And one of the bullet points, it says, and I've got it here, it says, be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent, non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. There's just so much weird that's going down with aliens, with DMT entities. Really, we really think this is happening, that we really think this is what's going down. And the answer is honestly and truly yes.
Welcome back to the transmission, my friends. We're all aware there's more to consciousness than the mundane, the task-oriented, default mode network-based cognitive postures. More than fantasizing about getting your work done so that you can eat delicious soup. Hot, salty, delicious soup on a cold winter day. A potage, technically. Despite that something more, we experience it, at least the vast majority of us, far too rarely. I know I was in a major rut before I attended a gateway experience retreat at the Monroe Institute in November, where I did get to dip into the more magical waters of consciousness, where a lot of things happened, but the week really climaxed in my first ever out-of-body experience, which honestly I'm still integrating 2 months later. But there was so much more magic at that retreat, magic like who I synchronistically wound up being roommates with. Why synchronous, you ask? Well, we have a ton in common. For one, Adam is the author of Butler's DMT Field Guide, for instance. Every day he was reading an esoteric book that looked right up my wonder alley, and also he was the only person of the 25 people at the retreat who actually knew who I was. We riffed, we resonated throughout the week. I knew I needed to have him in the mind meld. He's got a crazy life story. He's incredibly kind. He's really rebuilt his entire life around, I guess I'd call it, seeking. But anyway, this one just flowed. I would say maybe it overflowed with the quintessence, because there's a lot of good stuff in here. More on the gateway process, both the declassified document and the retreat itself. We thoroughly muse about the magic and mystery that is DMT, a topic and substance that Adam is very seasoned in. And with that, all the links for Adam Butler are in the description. Same for Third Eye Drops. And my friends, do presently like, sub, comment, share if you'd be so kind. Do check out Third Eye Drops wherever you listen to pods. We've got hundreds of audio-only mind melds just waiting for you. And speaking of waiting, not only myself, but hundreds of other sentient sacks of Stardust are waiting for you over at patreon.com/Third Eye Drops, because we've got a patron-only Discord server. We do Zoom hangs, a book club. You can get rewards. We would dearly love to have you, but presently, let's meld minds with Adam Butler. We are on the other side of the Monroe portal, my friends. I feel like there's going to be a lot of conversations about portals of various kinds today. But yeah, man, surreal experience. Surreal to have you as a roommate. And I guess surreal to be doing a mind meld with you now.
It is. That's a perfect example of the power of manifesting your intentions. Really. Yeah, no, I'm happy to see you. Before we started recording, just saying, what an experience to have, not only with you and I together as roommates, but the other, 24 people that we joined too. It was quite an amazing experience for sure.
Yeah, we'll definitely be riffing on Monroe gateway stuff. So many things. But one of the things we were just musing about a bit before hitting record is, and it's funny that you brought this up because I was thinking the same thing just a minute ago, is that when you're talking about something as arcane as this substance that we call DMT, right? The context of what it is, I think, greatly colors people's perception of it. Like, the context that we have established is that this is just drug, right? Which is, I think, one of the least useful sort of labels to put on something. Like, because that can do anything from make you unconscious to completely do the exact opposite thing, right? Like the spectrum of things that fit under that umbrella makes the term almost completely useless. And I was thinking about like, well, if in like antiquity they would have come across the distilled version of this molecule, how would they have thought about it? Like people like Andrew Gallimore, he likes to think of it like a technology. Um, but you were positing another way of thinking about it. So yeah, how do you think about it, and why do you think that context is important?
Well,
Yeah,
let's start with probably the most common term, which is the spirit molecule, right? That's from Rick Strassman's novel work that he did in the 1990s, where I think that encompasses quite a bit, and I think that's something that's applicable today and probably would have been used back in the day as well, because it does definitely connect you to some source that's bigger than and greater than. Um, I use in my book quite a bit the term miracle molecule, and it was because the first few times that I did it, I just kept saying to myself like, "This is such a miracle!" Like everything that came out of it, it was just yes, spirit molecule, but also miracle molecule. And I mentioned that there's probably a million different adjectives that could be used to describe it. Uh, we referenced the past episode that you did where you were discussing that it's kind of like a condensed essence of life, and it's an ism of something,
yeah,
because it is ubiquitous. It is in a bunch of plants and throughout the animal kingdom, and it's like, why is this endogenous molecule? And certainly, I agree. Drug is so limiting, and almost kind of dirty and condescending. Where that's why I think it's important to have conversations like this, where we can say, no, it's a plant based medicine. It's also endogenous. That's a term that
yeah,
anybody discussing DMT is going to be familiar with, meaning that it's produced in your own body. Um, these are molecules that have hugely beneficial applications, and I think that's what's finally being shown today. And to tie it back into your topic that you like to talk about is antiquity and what they did to explore their consciousness. I think DMT, whether it be in form of ayahuasca or potentially crystal form, and as well as other psychedelics, were certainly part of that exploration of consciousness.
yeah. I think there's no reason they wouldn't be. Like I've sort of my nuance on that, my opinion on all of that has sort of transformed over time. Where in the early days of the podcast, for sure, most of my experience and knowledge was from profound personal experiences with psychoactive molecules. So that's where my mind went immediately, right? Like, of course, that's what the ancients were doing. Like, why wouldn't they be doing that? But I also think the importance of what we're already alluding to, the importance of context along with that is understated, and the power of context is understated. Like, for instance, what you and I even experienced at Monroe Institute, I think in some ways is a testament to this. Like, for people that don't know, that aren't familiar with, the Monroe Institute, Gateway, all of this stuff, there's no psychoactive component whatsoever other than whatever you're carrying in your own hardware, software, on board. But just that context alone and just that practice alone, it's clear that so much is possible. It's clear that that is an entry point into some kind of great mystery. And I think the ancients, at least a certain class of the ancients, had this just unbroken lineage of understanding that I think there's no reason it wouldn't have included plant medicines or psychedelic plants. But I also think there's more to it than that, and I think there's this kind of, I don't know, synthesis that is underappreciated. It's like people who are like either in the psychedelic camp or they're against it, um, and I think it's just so much more complex and beautiful and probably embracing than that kind of like mutually exclusive way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I think context back in the day was huge because you didn't have the smut that's clouded all of our
Yeah.
senses nowadays with social media, mass media. Just, I mean, the crap. We just got through the election. That there's so much
Yeah.
stuff that a lot of people, and not me. I checked out of that stuff, a
Good for
long,
you.
long time ago. But um, you can imagine if once your basic needs were taken care of food and shelter and the basic comforts, you can imagine back in the day that was probably the thing to do, which is to explore yourself and to try to understand yourself. And um, psychedelics, for a bunch of reasons, allow that to happen. Probably as importantly, and I think what you were alluding to with Monroe, is the intention behind it.
Yeah.
So intention and context. So why are you doing it? How are you doing it? What's the purpose? And um, I know that today there's this kind of renaissance happening where people are really using it for way more than just the party scene or the rave scene or to go to
Yeah.
concerts. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's not necessarily how I like to enjoy it. But I read the kind of trip reports from back in the day, and it's very clear that they're having some psychedelic experiences. And if nothing else, the physiology of going into a dark space, of having deep
Yeah.
meditation, of trying to clear your thought, that alone is going to produce a whole flush of chemicals, including DMT. And I think that's an exciting part of kind of where we're at now in this day and age, is that the current science is backing up what these ancient kind of groups knew. Like Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza has that book,
Hmm.
Becoming Supernatural. One of my kind of top books that I got into actually before exploring psychedelics. I think it does a great job of tying just how important that mind body connection is to, to have that coherence with everything flowing through your body really is super, super powerful. And maybe, as I'm sure we're going to pick this all apart, but just to start off, like the big picture of all of this is just the amount of information that can be conveyed on vibrational wavelengths of energy. And that's exactly what they were doing at Monroe. I think that's exactly what DMT does. I think that's what
Yeah.
meditation does. I think that's what happens when you go into these altered states, is that it's just your antenna, or your ability to
Yeah.
receive information, gets highly refined, enhanced, and you become aware that you have way more than your initial five senses. And uh,
Yeah.
I think that's the exploration that you and I were saying that we'll continue to do for the rest of our life, because we're humble enough to know that we'll never have the full answer, and intellectually curious enough to know that there's always going to be these tangential paths to go down. And like, even our bullet points of things about potentially to talk about, it's like we could have added 10 more, and it's
Oh
like
yeah,
it's only going to get more crazy, more profound,
for
especially with
sure.
all the shit going on with aliens and
Oh god, yeah.
ghosts and all this crazy shit.
Yeah.
But it all ties together in in a weird way.
Yeah, it all ties together in consciousness for sure. Like once you open the door of really understanding or really even just entertaining the idea that consciousness is not just a thing that flowers out of a super complex, dense, hierarchized collection of brain networks or whatever, it's really does seem to be something that is latent and strewn throughout reality. And it's like with all of this stuff, I feel like I always need to exercise nuance because that is like a gateway to just allow everything. It's just like it's a ticket to Delulu, it's a ticket to schizophrenia if you want to take it there. But it doesn't mean it's not true to an extent. And as somebody, it's funny, dude, because the other thing I wanted to say too is like you brought up this idea of vibrations, and that could potentially be one of the most overused pieces of like new age claptrap, right? Vibrations. And me as someone who hates that shit, it like it there's part of me that's almost just like cringes at saying this, but it's fucking true, dude. And going,
Just like, it's all love, we're all one, it's all
it's
but it's
right.
true.
And I think that's
uh,
true too. I think
yeah.
that's truer than most people know or understand or realize. And that's a really interesting deep conversation in and of itself too. um when you get to the archetype of, what does that mean, what is love, how does that function? um but before we get there, what I mean by the vibration thing is true, at least in a way, is so this technology at Monroe, we're getting kind of away from where we were going initially, and I do want to go back to this idea of DMT as potentially this like distillation of some kind of knowledge, or I don't know, chemical key to some kind of perception or something. But on the point of vibrations, when you do a hemisync meditation, the technology that they use at Monroe in the gateway process to help you achieve certain states of consciousness, it is vibrations. Like, yes, there's other stuff. Yes, there's some guidance. Yes, there's some orientation of ideas in the beginning. But fundamentally, what you're doing is you're just bombarding your brain with a certain brainwave or with a certain frequency. And that frequency is directly tied to, if not a state of consciousness, a way to entrain your brain so that achieving that state of consciousness is easier.
And it's the same
And
with sound healing. It's the
yeah,
same with mantras. It's the same with so yeah. It's a very generic term, but I mean it's true. I mean it's vibrations on wavelengths.
yeah. And speaking of the ancients, they were obsessed with frequency, with melody, with sound, with the mathematics behind that sound, with the geometric um, sort of manifestations of sound. And they had this sort of all-encompassing understanding. Look to Plato, look to the Pythagoreans. um, they had this understanding that these principles were imbued all throughout reality. And seemingly separate disciplines, like, let's say, sacred geometry or something, right? Sacred geometry is just another version of exactly what I'm talking about. All of these same principles are imbued throughout mathematics, um, are core to what humans find to be aesthetically pleasing. Um, they believed core to how creation was architected. All of these things are all intimately interwoven, at least to the ancient esoteric mind. And man, I hope it's true, because it's a way more
Well,
beautiful way to view reality and spirituality than the way we do now, for
a
the most
perfect
part.
segue to bring in the CIA paper, right? So
Well,
I
yeah.
so I printed that up and I have it beside me. I don't have the missing page 25, but I did read that, and it is available if anybody does want to read that quote unquote missing page. But I think it's important here because of a couple of things. Um,
Do you want to set the stage for what this document is real quick in case people don't know?
Sure. So it was written in 1983. It came out of Fort Meade by the commander, Wayne McDonnell.
Yeah.
And basically, he was tasked to see if the gateway process is valid. Does it work? How does it work? And kind of give a report on it with the intent of how can you use it in a military sense. So can they use it for spying? Can they use it for reconnaissance and things like that? So it's amazing as you read this because it's so far, and not that I read a bunch of like military reports, but it's so far from like the clear cut scientific, like, hey, we're just presenting the facts, because it is so dense with notes about meditation and kundalini energy and how you
Yeah.
can achieve these different levels. And um, one of the core things that it comes out of is that time and time again, it states that none of this contradicts any of the old religions. None of it contradicts any of the ancient wisdom. If anything, it kind of confirms it. At the end, they start referencing and quoting like Hindu texts. They talk
Right.
about the like Jewish Kabbalah, and I think that's where it kind of towards the end, and why it was kind of like taken out, was that a lot in that page that got taken out was kind of like what we were just saying. Well, everybody's coming to this realization that we are all energy. It does all relate to source. That consciousness is separate from our physical body, and that's definitely a rabbit hole we can get go down to. But the take home method from that 28-page report was one that the gateway process does indeed work. But then what I thought was really impressive for the people that haven't experienced it, or for somebody that hasn't had the profound psychedelic experiences that you and I have had, like once you've seen what we've seen, there's no question that it's real or that it has a lasting effect. But for the people that haven't, I think it's important for reports like this because it's a very scientific breakdown of toroidal fields and what the holographic
Yeah.
matrix is, and it's not coming from some woo woo like somebody trying to sell a documentary. It really is a government funded report. And
Right.
the take home from that um, is that yes, this shit works, and that we can separate our consciousness from our physical body. That body can transcend space and time. Like even that, they go over a pretty good breakdown of like quantum physics and how space and time are dimensions that don't really have limits.
Yeah.
It all comes down to like an absolute. Like I said, reading it, it's almost like this treatise on ancient wisdom, not a report on Gateway. But
Yeah.
that an important thing what that this proves, I think, is that it's not just random stories. And I think the stories that you and I and our friends tell are important because, I've done DMT hundreds of times, and I don't say that in a bragging way, but like my body and my brain and vessel is a great resource for anybody studying that. That being said, certain circles, they need more. They need,
Right.
and in this case, this is a very thorough documentation on how, yes, it does work. Um,
Yeah.
and then, we were discussing some of like the like, holy shit, if there's real. And there was the term non-corporeal energy forms. So
Oh,
on
right.
like the second to
Non-corporeal
last
entities. Yeah.
page, in one of like the bullet points, it says, and I've got it here, it says, be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. Like, what the fuck does that mean? I mean, that's basically
Yeah.
saying, listen, be prepared to see some weird shit. You're going to interact
Right.
with entities. You're going to interact with ghosts. You're going to transcend space and time. And it just kind of like, oh yeah, and then signed off on it by the commander.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah.
But and if we could, for the people that are still like, yeah, whatever, I don't get it, or I don't believe it, because it's when I talk about, like having sex with angels and wrestling my demons, and and I'm sure we'll get into the DMT entity stories. They are fantastic sounding and they are fun, but there is no way of proving them. I have no reason to embellish it. I'm telling you
Right.
these are what I'm seeing, but it's hard for people to be like, yeah, still that he could just be making that shit up. Like
Right.
when we had Joe McGonigal there, and I
Yeah.
heard you talk about it a couple of times, and just what a fucking rock star, and what an amazing an opportunity to listen to what he has to say. But for the naysayers out there, like the stuff that he's doing in that kind of group can be proven. So he's going and saying, yeah, the kids' blue sneakers are in the red backpack, excuse me, are in the shed 30 feet down the hill. And people will go find it. Like, yeah, that's John Smith's backpack. Or just time and time again, um, the whole hunt for Red October, where he
Right.
literally found the freaking like the
Yeah.
Russian
Yeah.
sub. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, if it was fake and bullshit, you couldn't substantiate it factually. And there's so many cases where not only him, but other people have refined their ability to do this time and time again, where what more proof do you need? And, I recently heard Dean,
Real, real quick, we're jumping around to a few different things here, so I just want to make sure people can follow. So I've talked about it before on the show, but this guy who is probably the most world-renowned living remote viewer, Joe McMoneagle. He was involved in Project Stargate, Project Grill Flame, all the different monikers this formerly declassified program went under, in which intelligence agencies were studying psi phenomena and also using remote viewing to spy on the Soviets during the Cold War. Um, and as fantastical as that might sound, if you haven't looked into it, there's not only this Gateway report, which is not, again, kind of important to establish that that's not the same thing as remote viewing, but it's yet another example of a non-physical kind of um, sense capacity that humans have access to potentially. Um, and that speaks to a little bit why the CIA report even occurred in the first place. And to spell it out a little more, because there was this whole giant undertaking on the part of the intelligence apparatus of the United States to study psi phenomena, to see if psychic spying is real, to see if remote viewing, out of body experiences, all these other things work if they're real. And it officially, this all the inquiries into this stuff end in the 90s. But when you meet Joe McMoneagle and you hear story after story after story about how he and his coworkers, I guess, were successful in doing what they were asked to do, to the point of them being asked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times by different agencies to do things, it becomes very clear that this was working well enough to be funded, to be used, to be, you know, even thought scary and dangerous by certain elements of the government. Clearly there's something going on. Clearly there's a lot more going on than just a psyop or like a um I don't know, some kind of like sleight of hand. I don't even know what you could chalk it up to. The fact that this stuff existed for decades actively, and was actively concealed. You know, you can see the paper trail now of how this was actively concealed for decades. So
Remember
just
him
wanted to
saying too,
establish
like
that.
when
Yeah.
he in his will, he's gonna release some
Oh
bombs
man.
about Mars and shit. And hopefully, I'm not
Yeah.
getting him in trouble. But it's like, no, and you hear his story and how he's worked for 5 separate presidents, and how he's had his life threatened, and how the stress of a job like that, and you have to take the stories from the source, and I feel like he's a valid source, and I, not to say that there aren't necessarily ulterior motives, or that there wasn't money involved or ego. I mean, I'm not. People could always say, yeah, well, he pursued it for this. When you sat there like we did for 3 hours and listen to him talk, and then you come out of it with his whole goal now is to help missing children and kidnapped children, and to help, and to, like, he's, and the end of his whole conversation was basically that it all comes down to love, and that we're magical. I remember him saying that, we really are magical. And now I think at this his age, he's really trying to do what Robert Monroe did too, which is just,
Yeah.
we need to share this information. We need to put it in a context where it's not this, once again, woo woo crazy shit that just people like you and I are going to go to Monroe because, well, yeah, they're out there anyway. Where it's like, no, this stuff really has real life applications.
Yeah.
And then I know, we're going on another tangent here, but you recently, and I mentioned how you like the third or fourth person that brought up the telepathy tapes. Excuse
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think that's another group of people that are proving too that altered states of consciousness, or elevated states of consciousness, or that we have more than our normal 5 senses.
Mhm.
But I take them as a group of people also. What is their motivation for sharing their
Right.
story? Why are they doing this? And I find that it seems to be authentic and true and real. And there's no way that thousands and thousands of data points from all of these different people, whether remote viewing or some of these other extrasensory abilities, that some of
Right.
them are real. And I've experienced it, and I'm sure I don't know how far you got into your experience there when you kind of left your body, but like I saw it in your eyes, like
Yeah.
it's like you know when shit's real. And I that's why I'm
Yeah.
on this podcast kind of kick sharing my story, because I don't need to convince the psychonauts and the whatever the midlife crisis guys that are going through some of the drama that I've had. It's more the memes and pepes, or the aunts and uncles, or the people that wouldn't even think about using plant-based medicines, to share the story, to be like, no, listen, this is this is
Yeah.
real. And there's a lot of different data points, or a lot of different ways that people are coming to the same conclusion. And I think, as importantly, the quantum physicist, the Donald Hoffmans, the whatever, like, I mean, you have all these people on your show that are kind of saying like, yeah, consciousness is something greater than and more than what
Yeah.
a,
Fundamental. Yeah.
physical body is.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
And then tight
So
psychedelics now taps into that, whether it be a technology
yeah.
like Gallimore says, or it removes the veil, or that's a
Right.
that's where I'm at right now, is trying to figure out how much information I can gather from this
Yeah. You present
newfound.
yeah. You've presented me with so many avenues to follow up on here. But okay, two things jump to mind right away. One is like whenever I'm confronted with a skeptic, right? Like a lot of what we were just talking about could be construed as like evidence to convince someone. So first of all, if I'm confronted by a skeptic, I I don't really feel the need to convince anyone of anything. I might give them, okay, if you really want to know the answer to your question, like I just did this in the comments to somebody like yesterday. Um, I gave them a list of like half a dozen names off the top of my head to look into if they really want to look at the scientific evidence for psi phenomena, near death experiences, um, uh, out of body stuff, whatever. So there's that. But the beauty of all of this stuff is that you don't really need that kind of evidence. You can just do the shit. You can just experience the stuff for yourself. And that's one of the reasons I think early on I was just so, and still am, but early on especially, was so captivated by people like Terrence McKenna, by people who were just like,
Yeah, try it. If you think I'm
just stop.
bullshitting, then
Yeah,
try
just
it.
stop. Exactly. Just do this. Just do this, and then let's talk. And again, it's not like everybody needs to do that to do DMT or a psychedelic or whatever. That you don't. That is one great way to catalyze a kind of understanding, to enter layers of experience that are not hypothetical, they're not intellectual, they are direct, all encompassing, captivating kinds of knowing that takes you into the mystery and takes you into places where your language will fail, your concepts will fail. You'll bump up against every kind of conceptual limit that you can conceive of because it's so beyond concept and language and easy boundaries that you'll come out of it like in some ways a lot less sure than you were before, but it's like a kind of less sure that's reassuring in some kind of way because
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I
Yeah.
thought this was it. I thought this was everything, and it's not. I don't necessarily know, but I know that there's more going on. There's a lot more going on. More to consciousness, more to perception, more to the world. And if you're ready for that, you're stable enough to handle that, like then I can probably sign off on experimentation. I'll say that. But then going back to the CIA document, because I could do multiple pieces of content on this thing. It's so interesting. It's such a fabulous relic of what I was talking about before. The fact that there was this, like, if this, there's no way this thing exists in a vacuum. That's one of the points. Like what I was saying before is that it is just part of one of the most well-known parts of, but it's only part of this multi-decade thing that was going on in clandestine US tax-funded organizations that clearly must have had some kind of payoff, some kind of efficacy because it lasted for so long. So that in and of itself is mind-blowingly interesting because there's a million questions that
Yeah,
fractal
like
off
where's
of
that
it. Like,
program right now,
yeah,
too?
yeah.
It
Is it
definitely didn't just go
right?
away.
Is it still going on? What did they learn about consciousness? Like, how did they suppress that information from getting out? Was there, active interference to try to, submarine people who were trying to spread these secrets about consciousness and about what's possible with consciousness? And yeah, man, it's just like that guy McDonald who wrote the paper. I want to know more about this guy because clearly he was a seeker. He's the perfect kind of person I would love to do a podcast with because he's coming at it from a philosophical point of view. Again, the author of this Gateway Report, who clearly took part in it and was convinced of its efficacy to some degree. Like, to your point, he's referencing philosophy. He's referencing cutting edge scientific ideas. Um, the philosophy of consciousness, all of this stuff, and he's creating this way of understanding this ecology of ideas that makes it make sense in a very plausible way that is both scientific and practical. And that takes a certain kind of knowledge and implies a certain like breadth of experience that really implies that this dude is a seeker. Like he
Well,
knows what he's doing and he's like been selected to go, study this thing and write this insane document that exists now.
and I think
Um
he knew that he had to present it very, you know, not lightly, but frame it in that context. I think he knew that this was probably going to like end his career, or that most people would look at him and be like, this is, not what probably they were expecting. But that the take home message is, no, this is way bigger than this. This has greater implications than this is kind of like, we'll bring up existential and ontological questions of people, similar to like kind of the, not panic, but the whole kind of like alien disclosure type thing, where it's like, well, what does that mean? If what we're saying is true, and you and I are continually saying that it's true, we've experienced it. If that is indeed the case, like what that has such profound impacts on everything.
Yeah. To give
But the
people
time has come. I mean, what like
yeah. To give people an idea of the kind of thing we're talking about that you'll get in this document. I'm just remembering now that I sent you
and I
some
have it
kind of
here if you need me to
okay,
reference
cool.
some of the
Yeah, and if there's any, did you highlight anything specific?
I did. Well, just because
Okay, cool.
the terminology that they use, it's just like they know how insane that, like, what they're saying is, and it's crazy.
Yeah. Okay. The thing that I sent you was a blurb about Focus 21, which I think is a little bit out of context for people that don't know. Though they're now I'm remembering why I sent this to you, but yeah, this might be a little bit. We might need to explain some things before getting into this because it's just, yeah. Why don't you share something if there's something that jumps out at you that you highlighted in the report?
Is so one, I guess the fact that be intellectually prepared to react with aliens in essence is what they're saying.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I mean that's obviously a big one. And then right at the front, so right before he even gets into it, and this is kind of like one of his last points in that opening paragraph, just saying that, I felt it necessary after completing the analysis to point out that the resulting conclusions do not in any way violence to the fundamental mainstream either Eastern or Western belief systems. Unless that point is clearly established, the danger exists that some people will reject the whole concept of the gateway experience in the mistaken belief that it contradicts and is therefore alien to all that we hold to be right and true. And to your point, that's why I think he framed it with a lot of this extra stuff, with the quantum physics stuff, the toroidal field stuff.
Yeah.
I think he went to great lengths to say that he wasn't just hypnotized, or he didn't go there and get, he wasn't fed the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And it's like, oh yeah, you're just saying it because they got to you as well. Where it's like, no, I think he took really the time to outline that.
Yeah.
Take it serious.
Have you by chance heard of Itzhak Bentov?
He's mentioned in here.
I knew that he had some kind of connection to Gateway and Monroe, but for the Third Eye Drops book club right now, we're reading his book Stalking the Wild Pendulum. Mm-hmm. And this guy, Itzhak Bentov, is like this polymath Renaissance man who I'm guessing was some kind of like maybe advisor to him or teacher of McDonald who wrote this report. And he is fantastically interesting in that I think he like dropped out of school. Like I don't think he graduated high school, but he is like this super genius guy who made a bunch of money inventing and selling medical implant devices. Like he just engineered this stuff on his own with no formal training and sold all of these medical devices to big companies. But he also wrote this book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, which is like an all-encompassing thesis on what reality is. And it is very much seems to be inspired by like ancient, it's kind of like the gateway philosophy in and of itself, in that you can definitely tell that it's got like ancient wisdom and understandings of what reality is all throughout it. Yet Bob Monroe tried to remove any kind of dogma, any kind of associations with any particular group or particular lineage from it, because he didn't want it to have baggage. Like he really wanted it to be modernized and not thought of as a religion, but as like a science, as something you could really experience and verify for yourself. And that seems to be the same disposition as this Itzhak Bentov guy, who, like I said, clearly inspired by ancient stuff, but he goes deep into scientific theories, everything from like black holes and quantum physics and holographic universe. He goes over all of these ideas that are cutting edge, especially for the time he wrote this book, which I think was in the 70s or maybe early 80s. I'd have to double check. And then there's the added layer of he died under really weird, mysterious circumstances. Like he died in a plane crash and, on his way to do something that sounds very like, oh, maybe somebody didn't want him to do that, like give some talk or give some briefing or something like that. So yeah, there's this interesting whole philosophical movement that's occurring around this time, with people like Monroe, this McDonald guy who wrote this report, with Itzhak Bentov, where it's like this understanding about reality that is slowly unfolding, that really harmonizes ancient wisdom and cutting edge science. And then it seems like I don't know, maybe this is just my reading and maybe because I like, am turned on by conspiracy theories, but it really seems like this is actively squelched by the scientific mainstream in a lot of ways, and it's only more recently starting to come to light now, like with our generation. um but maybe that's just my my bias or something.
I do think that there is this, and again, throw around these terms that are kind of cliche, but like this fundamental shift in human consciousness. Like, what is the next step of human evolution? Um, I see that we are at this kind of inflection point where things are going to either, I think, drop drastically horrible and kind of this self-destructive path, or
Yeah.
we can turn to a better way. Right? And I guess, like, I mean, not to try to sound like I'm all savior and everything, but like that's ultimately the message that I'm trying to share with people, is that, listen, there is a better way. Because I used to dwell quite a bit in the dark, nasty funk of, suicidal thoughts and depression, anxiety, stress, blaming other people, hatred, disconnection, all of that type of shit. And um, coming on the other side of it, seeing what love and connection and gratitude and joy and all of that, can bring. I think there is this kind of ancient struggle, like the truly the kind of light versus dark, good versus evil. Whether it be an Armageddon or apocalypse, and again, it ties into all of the ancient stuff that we all love and study, where they talk about this type of stuff and they talk about it pretty matter of factly. Not, there is some allegories and there are some stories, but um, I think the ancient people very clearly knew that they could tap into something higher, that there are other beings
Hmm.
out there. And um, I really think that that's happening now. What that means, and how do we say what that means without sounding batshit crazy? Like my girlfriend, left this morning. We were sitting on the bed talking, and there's just so much weird shit that's going down in our lives
Yeah.
personally, with aliens, with DMT entities, with all this crazy shit. And it's like, is this like, this is really, like, we really think this is happening, that we really think this is what's going down? And the answer is honestly and truly yes. Um, and it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I think the next 5 to 10 or whatever, it's gonna few years are gonna be very interesting.
I think so too, man. And yeah, I mean, it's just really, really zooming out, taking out any assumptions. I think if you took a 10,000-foot view of the human psyche, of what's going on in the world, I would have a very hard time dismissing the idea that something else is making itself known.
Mhm.
Something else is like slowly seeping into human awareness. And we are struggling collectively to understand what that is, figure out how to contextualize that in our lives. And just to completely complicate this and just throw an unanswerable question out there, because it's just so fucking fun to talk about and speculate about. is the relationship between, like what in that report they call non-corporeal energy forms or
Hmm.
consciousnesses, DMT entities, extraterrestrials. Do you have a strong feeling on what you think the relationship between those things is? Do you think they're all the same thing, or do you think they're all, you know, uh, unique things in and of themselves? Like, yes, there are real physical aliens from another planet out there, or no, they're consciousness based, or where's your head on
And I
this
would throw in,
irresponsible but
throw
fun
in
shit?
ghosts in there, spirits in there, maybe
Right?
even
Why
like
not?
cryptids, Bigfoots, all of that type of stuff.
Throw it
Um,
all in.
throw it all in. So my kind of take on it is, I think we are way more than our human five senses, and I think psychedelics prove that to me very clearly. And there are other states, whether it be people that are in lucid dream states, deep meditation, people have like epileptic lobe seizures. They have all of these different crazy visions. What it is that our brain, and this is kind of Aldous Huxley's reducing valve
Yeah, right.
kind of theory, is that I really think we filter out so much of the information, that vibratory information that constantly surrounds us, that when we can find ways to hone our antenna or add different layers or complexities to how we receive that energy and information, um, you just get exposed to that much more. So instead of having your normal five senses dialed up to 10, when you're on psychedelics, they're dialed up to 100 or a million. But then you also have 5, 10, 15, 20 other senses that, that's what I don't think we have terms to describe what they are. And
Right.
that's kind of the point, is we're getting informational inputs in a way other than our normal five senses that somehow land and stick, and obviously are able to convey that information. Um, and I think once we are able to get into that elevated state or receive different levels of spectrum of energy, you're exposed to that much more. So, um, yeah, I think you can see spirits and ghosts once you're refined to it. I think aliens do present themselves to the people, like the Chris Bledsoes that clearly are tapped into something. Whether it be trauma induced, whether it be psychedelic induced, that there's a lot of ways, like near death experiences, people that have come back from comas or from being drowned and stuff like that. Something makes their antenna more refined. For me, I know it was I fried the shit out of it with DMT and shrooms, and because I needed to. I mean, I really needed
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
completely reset my antenna. But now that it is like that, I know that I can receive more information than just my five senses. And I think too, once you've experienced what it feels like to get DNA downloads or to get inputs of a software upgrade or all these ways that people say that they're getting information, or that they're interacting with these entities, that doesn't just leave you when you're not in that heightened state. And I think that's where part of like this integration, or like, now what do you do with all of this profound information? How do you put it in a context where it doesn't drive you nuts and actually use it in a way that is positive? And
Hmm.
I now walk around everyone, in a normal walking state, knowing that at any moment I can receive different information. And it's an exciting way to live, because I know I'm way more than just my physical body, and way more than my five senses. And I think that now is kind of like not being disputed. There's so many people with all these extrasensory perceptions, and everybody is kind of unique and magical in their own way. But to say that we're just these five senses, I don't think that can be said with a straight face anymore, because there's too many people with personal stories to say, no, I saw the ghost, I saw the alien, I interact with the DMT entity, and I'm one of
Yeah.
those people, and I can say they're there, because
Yeah.
I also know what clearly is a fucked up dream. I know what hallucinations are. I know, I know when my mind's playing tricks on me, but then I also know when, oh
Yeah.
shit, like I'm viscerally interacting with another being, and
Yeah.
in some cases it truly changes lives. It saves lives. So the
Yeah.
information's real.
That's a really important distinction, because I think that there are, I don't at all discount the massive stories, but you also have to know that you didn't live their experience and you don't know how you would have interpreted that experience. So again, I come back to this: prove it to yourself. Have the experience for yourself. I don't care what methodology you use. I don't care if you start doing meditating, doing gateway, experimenting with psychoactive stuff. There are ways to experience this. So if you're one of those people who you find that your intellect, it just keeps getting in the way, and you keep feeling like there's not enough evidence for that. I
Hmm.
don't say that. That, how
Yeah,
do you know it's not?
spend a weekend with me.
Just shut. Yeah, exactly. Just shut up and start trying things. Start, like,
Yeah.
open your mind at least to the idea that maybe what Adam is saying here has something to it. And that's how it starts. Start understanding that your consciousness, I'm already sabotaging myself by saying start understanding it, because it's not an intellectual thing. It's something you actually learn through experience, or at least culminates in you having an experience. Because I love the stories, dude. I on my desk right now in front of me, I have a book about Jung's visionary experiences. I have a book about theurgy. I have Jung's red book behind me. I love fucking stories, right? But that's why I value the experience I had at Monroe so much, is because it was not intellectual. It was absolutely experience based. And I do think like increasing the perimeter of your information and your concepts helps you contextualize and understand those experiences better, helps you have the ability to apply different lenses to those experiences, right? Because if you only have one lens, like let's say you only have the Judeo-Christian lens or something. Well, how are you going to interpret any kind of experience beyond the normal then? You're going to try to funnel it into that. Now, if you have 50 or however many, it really broadens the horizon of what you can even possibly conceive of, right? And that's like McKenna has this crazy idea that still blows my mind when I think about it, that until there's language for something, your ability to conceptualize it as a human doesn't quite exist yet. Like you can't really, if you can't conceptually wrap something in an idea, well, then that thing doesn't exist because you can't talk about it. You can only understand it in this very foggy um, way that you can't communicate to anyone else. Now, this is a double edged sword, because if you try to do something like wrap a DMT entity or whatever in a linguistic box and say that's what it is, you know, you're clearly reducing it to something that doesn't fully capture it. Yet at the same time, you're in this catch 22 where you need that language. So, point being, I think that there is this beautiful interplay between increasing the horizon of your understanding with new lenses, with new concepts. And that does help you understand these non ordinary states of consciousness and the things you encounter there better. But at the end of the day, all you're doing is upping the resolution, like little by little by little, and you're never going to fully capture it. And that's why you just have to experience it for yourself. Like,
Yeah, come up with
it
your own terms for it.
yeah. Yeah. And,
Well,
the point about other senses, that's something I think Monroe talks about in his book too, is that there are colors that you have never seen in the out of body state. There are, and this is definitely true of psychedelics too, there are sensations that you don't have like in your physical body. There are things that you can experience. I mean, dude, like here's an idea of, an exact conceptual horizon thing that absolutely just gave me chills the first time I read it was, the experience of like the unbelievably dialed up perception on like a heroic dose, where it's just you can't say what you're experiencing sometimes is happiness or sadness or whatever it is. It's just like this all-encompassing overwhelm that you're experiencing with the full intensity of your entire being. It's everything, and it's also beyond the five senses, right? And it's just this all-encompassing sort of 360-degree multi-dimensional face melting, right? That's just so raw and so real. And then I came across this idea reading some of the ancient stuff about how truly there's one sense, and it's the soul sense. Like you have an eye of the soul, or you have this, this 360-degree, like I said, all encompassing kind of sense, but it gets dampened down in the body. It divides itself up. It permeates the body and sort of goes on this lower frequency. But you
And
can experience exactly what they're talking about under the right circumstances, that there really is this one thing that's just overwhelming. It's all emotions, it's all perceptions, it's just everything. And it's just this, like I said, just this absolutely brain melting glory and overwhelming isness of reality. And it makes sense why the body would tampen that shit down, because you definitely can't live that way. But it's incredible and it's very real.
well, and you just say that with a smile, and to me that sounds beautiful to explore that and to truly get to know yourself. But some people, that's the scariest thing possible, and
Right.
they avoid it at all costs, which is why they prescription pills and douse it with alcohol and all of that. But I think that's going to be one of the that is everybody's main purpose in life is to know thyself. And talk about condensing all the ancient wisdom like that. That a lot of times it comes down to that simple phrase, know thyself. Ultimately, that's what the Gateway paper came down to. Like the
Mhm.
couple last paragraphs, it was ultimately then quoted, I think Cicero or something saying like, know yourself. Um, but part of that experience that you just discussed is insane as it is. People have to know that it's not going to be all fun and roses
No.
and unicorns and fairy dust and shit. There's going to be some horrifically dark, nasty shadow work that happens in there. There will be ebbs and flows and cycles, and this is also where a lot of that ancient wisdom keeps repeating itself, like the Hermetic principles about the law of vibration and things constantly have an ebb and a flow, and that there is a male and a female aspect to things, and that you get to experience all of that. Now, if you're not ready for that, or if you just think, oh yeah, I'm going to take shrooms because I heard it's great, that's where people can have these quote unquote bad trips.
Yeah.
I don't think if you have a bad trip where you get to hold a proverbial mirror against yourself or see yourself and learn about yourself and do have the opportunity to fix some of the most profound issues that you have, I don't see that being a bad trip. Is it difficult? Yeah. Is it challenging? Yep. Yeah, is it scary sometimes? Absolutely. But I know for me, that's what I personally needed, was to see not only the beautiful side of myself, and I can rant. I know how much I love myself now and my sense of self and worth. Um, but that's only after I was able to do the battle with my really shitty demons. But that's an important part of it. It's not some easy cure all like, oh yeah, just go to Monroe. I mean, think about every time we did the debrief with all of those people. How many
Yeah.
times were people bawling and in tears?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it's hard. It's really hard to dislodge some of this stuff. But the alternative is continue on a life of stress, anxiety, the kind of path of self destruction, which a lot of people are on. And when people see the light, so to speak, however they see it, it changes them, it transforms them. It and there's so many corny ways of saying what comes out of all of this. But I kind of sum it up with you learn to know yourself. As soon as you know yourself, you get to love yourself. And when you love yourself, that love just kind of translate into love of your neighbor and love of your planet. And it becomes an easier way to live. But until you can actually love yourself and know yourself, none of this matters, or none of it's possible. And I think each one of these practices, whether it be going into a cave for 3 days, whether it be going to Monroe for a week, or whether it be whatever heroic dose of shrooms or DMT, um, the goal is to know yourself. And my experience with myself, with my friends, with the new people that I met at Monroe is knowing yourself doesn't mean you try to make yourself perfect, or remove the warts and the flaws or the past traumas or the losses. Not at all. If anything, you shine a light on them. You bring them to the forefront.
Right.
You put them in the right context, and then you're able to move on. And that's I think the biggest takeaway from all of these esoteric practices, or the desire to know yourself, is then everything just kind of falls in line. Then you normally have a nice natural mind and body
Mm-hmm.
connection. You know how to read other people's energies. You rest peacefully because you know it's time to recoup. It's just no, and there's still everyday life problems and bullshit, but people that have seen the light, so to speak, it's awesome because you feel it, you can see it, you can
Yeah.
sense it in them.
Mm-hmm.
That they're not in a self-destructive path like I was, 4 years ago. Honestly, not only would you have never been wanted to be my friend or be my roommate or have anything even remotely, intelligent to discuss with me, I was just this nasty, drunk, alcoholic, belligerent jackass of a guy who lost everything because of that dark nastiness. And one thing can't be disputed with psychedelics is that it really does have a transformational effect on people, and not just the asshole drunk like me who and I go over my personal story, how I have to take responsibility for everything that went bad in my life. It wasn't like a
Mm-hmm.
woe is me type story, but you hear about all these veterans and these people that have postpartum depression and the results that are happening through these types of transformations, and that can't be disputed. So and for people that are still kind of questioning, like, is it real, is it just their brain playing tricks on them, I would kind of propose, does it matter? I mean, if it's truly making people not kill themselves, if it's making people put loss and trauma into the right, perspective or compartment in their brain, um, if it allows us to commune with God, whatever that may be, like, these are all positive things. And that's again, that was a take home from the Gateway Papers, was that, we all kind of have that same realization. And to add another kind of point to that, but I remember watching a video on, I think it was a sound engineer that helped Bob Monroe make
Mm-hmm.
those videos. I think he started his own company with the intent of, it's pretty much the same hemisync technology. But then the idea is, well, what do you do afterwards once you have these experiences? And my understanding is, like, a lot of the military studies, they came back and they didn't want to use it for nefarious reasons. They didn't want to use, like, their brain powers to fuck over people.
Yeah.
They realized, no, we got to use it for good. And um, that seems to be a very common theme too, where once you connect to yourself and connect to source, you naturally want to
Right.
help your neighbor. And that doesn't
Yeah.
mean agree with, that doesn't mean like you can have a difference of opinion. It's just you approach it with a sense of, you know what, I value my own worth. I know that my thoughts are of value, and that I have the ability to express them, or the right to express them. But then that also conveys to everybody else. And that's what I think is missing a lot in a lot of the dialogue today, is that people don't respect themselves, so they're not going to respect anybody
Right.
else talking to them.
Yeah, dude.
But as
It's
soon
like
as you take that back, it's easy to
totally,
share it.
totally. Super practical example. I was driving behind somebody in this like, beat up car or whatever the other day, and they just are like eating McDonald's and they just throw all the garbage out their window.
Ugh,
And
yeah.
you're just sitting behind you're just like, you motherfucker. But then in the back of your mind, that everything you just said is like the lived experience of that person. Like, they don't feel valued, they don't feel good about
Ugh.
themselves. They feel like society is against them. They feel like the world's against them. So they don't have a problem like throwing garbage food on, like, remains on the ground. And I don't even know what my point is by bringing that up, but I think you can extrapolate that over such a large portion of society right now, that it points to that there is just this, maybe not all pervasive, but this deep soul sickness, this like metastasized cancerous energy that is just deeply rooted in a large part of the collective psyche. And we're not going to get at that through science alone, at least. We're not going to get to that through the pharmaceutical industry. Like, this is part of the soul having some kind of like autoimmune response against itself, where it's so out of touch with itself, where it's so amnesic that it forgets that it even exists. And you've got to do something pretty drastic to wake yourself up from that kind of a funk, to break yourself out of that level of soul sickness. And it's not even just an individual thing. Like, it is a collective thing. And maybe that's why all of this stuff is making itself known now, Maybe that's why whatever this other thing is that we were talking about before, like something else is making itself known, is because it really has to. Like we're really at this kind of, I don't know, man. It feel my whole life I felt like we were on this tightrope between like collective destruction and enlightenment or something. And I really struggle, man, to adopt again that new age cliche idea that like, oh, this heightening of consciousness is coming and everything's going to be great. It really feels like there is a very equal paralleling race between, that collective soul sickness, destructive energy, and the ascension energy or whatever you want to call it.
Well,
And I think the only thing that's going to tip the scale, man, truly is collective personal choice. Like there needs to be some kind of effort, like honestly, global effort to experience these things personally, to do that dark work, to like get into the shadow, to look in those places, like you mentioned before, like some people are terrified of that experiencing. And guess what? I'm terrified of it too. It's one of the most like it's the most humbling thing. Like, I was thinking about the meme where the guy is like sweating deciding which button to push, and then there's some versions of it where he's pushing both buttons. Like that's what these experiences are. It's like love and fear, annihilation and immortality. It's like all of those
because
things
it's
all
one
at
on the same
once.
spectrum.
Yeah,
It's
right,
the
right.
same. They're only different by scale, or it, they're the same things.
Yeah, in a strange way,
But
like what that ties together this know thyself idea. Like that's what it means. Like to really experience all those spectrums and like extremes. That's what it means to know yourself. Like on a meta deep level that is both healing and annihilating. It's like healing through annihilation in some ways. Like I
well,
don't know.
in you talk about the asshole that throws McDonald's out, and there's so many different examples of like how the hell could a human act like that? So yeah, why would you ever litter, or like why would you ever not hold the door for an old lady, or like how can any country have kids that are going hungry, or like I mean, there's so many examples of how humans act nasty towards one another and including themselves, and I agree that there has to be this kind of mass removal of that. And I use the analogy of plaque, how I think
Mhm.
society just builds up so much plaque on everybody. And some of it is to survive. I mean, same thing with like Huxley's reducing valve. You can't take in all the radio waves and microwaves and all these x-rays and all this
Right.
shit. Like, the whole point is you can't take in everything. Um, but that plaque over time bogs people down to where, yeah, they don't even think twice about littering and destroying the planet. They don't think twice about stealing from the neighbor, and then take it to the next level. They don't think twice about killing or
Yeah.
kidnapping, like all the horrible shit that people do. And that analogy of plaque, and this is where psychedelics for me was that mechanical removal of it. And
Mhm.
whether
Mhm.
people need a mechanical removal, a chemical removal, or whatever it may be, I know when I had that proverbial plaque removed for me, it was such a twofold thing where not only all of that weight was removed, so that way I could express my true light, my creativity, my uniqueness. I could laugh, I could smile, I could express myself. I felt comfortable in my own skin. But I also now was able to receive the beautiful divine light from source, from other people, from just from being connected to that energy. And it's a visual analogy, but I think it applies. But so many people are just covered with that shit, and
Mhm.
something needs to remove it. Whether it be a weekend trip to Monroe, like we know happened to people, or whether it be 50 hits of DMT, like my first day. Um,
Oh god.
that's
Y-
like
yeah.
something needs to blast that plaque. And again, once that plaque's removed, it's not like there's not going to be traffic tickets or bullshit, or you're never going to stub your toe again. I mean, life's still going to give you some kicks in the dick, and there will be some bad things, but you approach it in a way uh, of truly of gratitude, knowing that everything is an ebb and a flow, and that everything is happening for a reason. That enjoy the experience, live in the current now. Don't be so caught up in the past or future. Um, and it's such a liberating, enriching, and enhancing way to live when you don't have that crap built up around you. And I know,
Mhm.
like in my case, I was using alcohol quite a bit, and I was so on the offensive if anybody said anything negative about me, because I always would just throw in all my financial successes and my material successes and be like, "Oh, how dare you question me? Look how great I am." And you always just use that as a defense. And because of that, I mean, I literally destroyed my life and everything in it and everybody around it. And only until I was able to finally be my true, unique, weird self was I able to thrive again. Now, not thrive financially. I mean, I'm
Right.
still, I still got a big pile of shit that I'm working out of. But I'd say one important aspect of psychedelics or inner work of trying to know yourself is you stop banging your head against the wall or stop doing the things that don't work. It's not that all the problems go away. If anything, a spotlight is shined directly on them. But now you know where to put your mental and physical energy to correct it. Where, for years and years of my life, I just was wasting all of my beautiful mental and physical energy in a self-destructive path as opposed to a beautiful creative path. And
Yeah.
just that intellectual shift of taking control over how you not only express yourself but also what energy you let in, what that resonant field that you build around you, um, is super super important. And
Yeah.
those are the lessons that don't just go away. Those are the lessons that stick with you for life. And a big part of me trying to share this message too is that it just feels good. Like it's very easy to not be an alcoholic. Like it's very easy to wake up full of gratitude and joy. It's very easy to feel like you're one with sauce, and that,
Right.
to love your neighbor, as opposed to the person that's constantly yelling, the person that's constantly, yelling at the person at the in the market line, or every time they get in the car they're having road rage. Where and I don't know if I use this, story with you at Monroe, but I heard this story about where was on a podcast where somebody was like, if there's one or two assholes in your life, well, then, they're the assholes. If everybody in your life is the asshole, like you're the asshole,
Right.
you got to
Yeah.
take a
Yeah.
look at yourself. And if every day you're the guy that's yelling, like I said, in the car and having road rage, if every day you're getting home looking at the news and you're screaming at the TV, if you're pissed off about making dinner, then pissed off about cleaning dinner, you're pissed off about, like, man, take a step back, because once you realize that life can be full of like ice cream and coffee and making love to beautiful women and walks in the woods and, just amazing experiences like we've shared,
Yeah.
doing that next step in human evolution becomes almost easy, natural, and just like a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Mhm.
because it feels good. It
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, there's that Alan Watts, I think it is, quote. I think it's Alan Watts, where he says something to the effect of, you can do it like it's a great burden, or you can do it like a dance. It's like you're going to go through life one way or the other. What disposition do you want it to have? I wanted to say too, it's really interesting that you put it as like this removal of plaque, because one of the most influential Platonic philosophers, Plotinus, who, if you haven't heard of him, he is this like deep contemplative. Like, he underscores the importance of reconnecting with source, divinity, the one, through isolation and through removing yourself from worldly input and doing what just sounds like deep meditation and contemplation, but from a very uh I guess, like, devotional, almost like prayerful disposition, of like really, really reaching out, like really making it so that you are desiring divinity with all of your heart. Because that's a big difference. Like, I think when we sit down and meditate, we just watch our breath. I find myself kind of gravitating toward that kind of just humbleness and like almost prayerful, like just wanting to reconnect, wanting to ask for help, not with like any specific thing, like, please God, give me more followers, like, not like that, but just like generally, like, want to feel supported by everything. Um, so yeah, it's really interesting because he says, like, you must remove this. I think he says stains, not plaque, but it's the same idea. It's like, it, your perception, your sense of self, your psyche is just covered in stains, with like worldly stains of like exactly what you're talking about, emotional stains, obligations, trauma, things people said to you, ideas about yourself, like what all this shit. And that requires an undoing. And you can undo it through the method he prescribes, a lot of sitting down and meditating, through definitely, I think, through hemisync, through all these different ways of um, going deep inside the self. But I can absolutely guarantee that you can do it right now with a sufficient dose of a tryptamine. That's for sure. Um, we've been talking about very meta, like a lot of this stuff, very meta, and you've started to allude to your own experiences somewhat, your own struggles somewhat. Um, and I guess just as a fun entry point into those experiences and into your journey, how do you think about where DMT is taking you now? Like now that you've done it hundreds of times, now that you've, for people listening, you're the guy at the retreat waking up and reading an esoteric book every day. So you're like you're just actively in this seeker mode. So you're also like expanding your horizon of ideas and your all the different lenses that you have access to. With all of that, how do you think about what DMT is doing for you or where it's taking you now?
Yeah, so I can honestly say that DMT saved my life, and that's, I know that's a very heavy statement, but it's true. So I'm very grateful and thankful for the opportunity that I've had to truly. I feel like every day's a blessing. This is my second chance at life, and I'm never gonna take that for granted. Uh, but I share my story and how I got into it because it's not necessarily a pleasant one. It's actually horrifically dark, and like I said, it almost ended with me, losing my life. But it's important to share because hopefully it will prevent other people from going down that same dark path
Mhm.
of self destruction. Um, so I guess maybe just in context, how I even got exposed to it. And I kind of go over this quickly in my book because I don't want to sensationalize my own life. And I think, I just recently turned 44. Anybody that's come to my age is going to have a whole series of their own bullshit, their own, you know, lessons, trauma, loss, all of that. Mine, and I wanted to make this point though, was all self-induced. So I was the rich white kid from New England that grew up with, $100,000 gift from my grandfather to start businesses. I went to 8 years worth of college. I owned real estate investing company where, at one point I had like 15 houses, and not crazy amount, but I had the high paying jobs where I was making 200 grand a year, the fancy cars, the vacations, the beautiful women, all of that. Um, but then I lost it all where I had restraining order put against me. I had my long-term relationships, taken out from under me. I threatened to kill a man. There was a guy that was co-owner of the company I worked for that, screwed me over $900. Um, and at that point I was so thin on everything. And I had this culmination of like a year and a half of just all these things showing me like, Adam, you got to completely change your life. And, um, I started exploring psychedelics by getting into shrooms, and I would probably recommend that. I think just jumping in right into a hardcore DMT
Yeah,
session
yeah.
can be a bit traumatic. So I spent several months exploring shrooms and going pretty deep. I was 5, 6, 7 grams, and I
Yeah.
felt as though I was getting really good therapeutic value. I was holding up that proverbial mirror to myself. I was doing the shadow work. I was able to say the things that I needed to say to myself and really accept it, but I didn't have that big epiphany, like that change of perspective that was like, "Oh yeah, I'm good." Um, and I had heard quite a bit about DMT, the power of DMT, you know, and then a buddy of mine let me know that I had access to it. And once I knew I had access to it, then I really did as much research as I could. So I spent several months, reading Rick Strassman, listening to all the Joe Rogan podcasts, as much information as I could.
Right.
And I decided that, this, I'm going to give this a shot, that I've got nothing to lose. Cause at that point, I really was at the point where I was going to walk off into the woods and not come back. And it wasn't like a rash decision. Like I had a bad day. It was, I spent weeks just, figuring out, do I want to stay on this planet or not? And that first day that we set aside to do DMT was, like I said, that the day that just reconfigured everything in my life is how I perceive myself and my connection to other beings and earth. And without getting into all the details, and I mentioned how I took 50 hits that first day, and I wouldn't suggest doing that for everybody. And before people are like, bullshit, no way. It was spanned out over about an hour and a half, and it was like 7, 8 sessions, and each session was like 6, 7 hits. And that's the beauty of DMT as well, is that it only lasts, 7, 8 minutes. So you can do multiple sessions. But a couple of things about that day. The first thing I think is important is that first hit, it was so natural and so innate. So all of your senses are going, crazy, but it just felt like I wasn't being drugged or that I was being poisoned like you would with shrooms or LSD. It felt like the veil was being removed and that I was getting access to my true self, that I was truly having what my body should normally feel like with all of those extra senses and heightened senses. But, no real crazy epiphanies other than sights and sounds, no entities or anything like that. And I kept pushing that for, like I said, about an hour or so. And the last session I had was the one that really changed everything. So typically in the DMT session, there's all these crazy vibratory hums, there's sights and sounds, there's entities coming at you, there's, spiraling mandalas and all this crazy shit. Well, that last session, everything stopped. There was no hum, there was no sounds. I didn't feel like I was falling or that I was being sucked up into any portal. I was just there. And I had what I considered a DNA download or an upgrade or something, a conveyance of information that put really all of my personal drama and bullshit into a way that I could then deal with it. And
an energy conversion box.
An energy conversion box. Yeah, well, and I think the simplest way,
Monroe joke for people.
That did work though. Was that I was always trying to connect all of these proverbial dots from my past and my current and my future, and I was so worked up on how I was going to manage all the shit that I got myself into. How am I going to get out? And in that space, all of my proverbial dots got connected, and then those blew up, and then 1,000 dots, and then those got connected and blew up, and then 1,000,000 dots, and then 1,000,000,000 dots. And that the kind of take home message was like, haha, you stupid human. The point isn't to connect the dots. The point is to enjoy the space between the dots. The point is to enjoy the silence between the beat. That's where the information is. And I came out of that with the true sense of the importance of being here now in that very second. And that's where you have the only power that you have. So don't be stressed. Don't be anxious. And again, I had now a spotlight shine on all my bullshit, but that session that day was the time that I stopped looking for external solutions to my internal problems, or I stopped blaming the person, or that girl did that, or that guy did this, or fuck them. And I took ownership of everything. And that was like 3 years ago. And since then, my life has just been this completely different, changed life of happiness, joy, contentment, love, gratitude, and all the corny shit that I riff on. But it got me on this path of what I needed to really focus on. Then, with all of that, then I took a year and a half off. I traveled across the country. I lived in my car. I lived on beaches. I went to all the national parks, and I really did what I know how fortunate I was able to do this, but I took a spiritual journey of over a year and just meditated and prayed and did lots of shrooms and lots of DMT. And now I'm just kind of coming back to the matrix or the reality, or, and that's, and I asked this as a almost rhetorical question to you and your listeners, where it's like, it's kind of like, so now what? Now that you've seen all this, how do you come back and still incorporate enough into society or the matrix or the bullshit or the simulation? But not just be the guy that sits on a mountaintop, drinking ayahuasca all day.
Right.
Like, and I'm still trying to find that balance, but I know I'll never go back to the rat race of somebody else's dream or somebody else's bullshit.
Well, you've had, first of all, it's beautiful. And second of all, you've had the luxury and the gift, the hard fought gift, to now see directly just how crazy this world is. And like the matrix, or like capitalism, or, the world, the time that we find ourselves in, and how disserviced to the soul it is, and how difficult it is to find balance. Because it's like, once you've awakened to all these things, to your point, the harsher realities like don't go away. Like, you might be able to take them a little lighter. You might be able to laugh at yourself more when you get those kicks in the dick you mentioned, but they still hurt, and you still got to pay the bills, and you still got to go like have diarrhea after you eat tacos and whatever. Like none of that shit changes. So yeah, finding that balance, man, is extraordinarily tricky. And I do think it's like you never feel more like that. I think it's from the Bible that it's like talks about how humans are like between the angels and animals or whatever. I don't know. I've heard that somewhere. But you never feel more like that than once you start to open these doors. And the just irony of it is so striking. Um, thanks for setting that context. But now I want to ask you the same question from before again, which is like, so you have this essentially awakening, I guess. Let's just call it that because it is, I would say. But how, maybe not even how are you viewing it then, but now with this context, 3 years down this trail of basically ravenously seeking experiences, having experiences, seeking knowledge, how do you think about where it's taking you? How do you think about coming full circle to that question at the beginning? How do you think about what it is, outside the construct of like, oh, it's a drug. Oh, it is a endogenously produced chemical compound that might be produced by the pineal gland or whatever. Like, aside
Well,
from all of that technical bullshit, like, what is it? Like what is it
well,
really doing?
I'm glad you asked me that, because I did want to clarify too when we were talking about like ghosts and
Mm,
entities and cryptids, and how I think if you have heightened or elevated senses that you're
yeah.
able to be, more sensitive to these types of things. Um, so I do agree with that. That being said, I think DMT entities are a completely different thing, a completely different space, and that's where, like Gallimore talking about it being a technology where it's
Hmm.
giving you access to something different. That's where I'm I'm very convinced that the DMT space and DMT entities is its own thing. So maybe similar to saying that your antenna can get refined and allowed to have access to different information, but the DMT is like a special, unique space where they are their own.
Ecosystem
They
or something.
yeah, they move around in their own dimensional space, and they don't use the law of physics that we have today. Like, maybe a good example is if you're on shrooms and you're staring at the wall, like, that the wall's melting, or maybe some crazy whatever, you have a whale that's going across the wall, but that it's your mind. It's, there is some shit that you're seeing, but it's a combination of the drug, and like it's a very clear like image that you're seeing, but the source of it. DMT entities, it's completely different, where
Yeah.
just the opposite, that this is not fabricated in my mind, that this is not something that I'm producing. And I mirror what Gallimore says, where he makes the comment about how he tries to, every experience that we have should model something in our past, or when we try
Right.
to, if some new information comes in, we try to model it on something to try to make it make sense. And if new information comes in, yes, there is going to be this kind of disorientating effect. Understand all of that.
Yeah.
um, but he makes the point, and I merit as well, is that the shit that you're seeing in this DMT space has nothing at all like related to any movie I've seen, any Alex
Yeah.
Gray painting, anything that I've experienced in my 44 years of being a white guy living in New England. Even with all the crazy shit that I've seen, there is no way that I have the mathematical precision in the understanding of geometric shapes and how things work, and how it's so far beyond anything that my mind can construct. And I'm the first to, it's like, I don't want to say I'm cocky or arrogant, but like, I know how powerful my mind is. Straight A's in college. I'm able to, have photographic memory. I've read thousands and thousands of books. Like, I understand the power of my brain. This shit is not me. There's no way that I can
Yeah.
make what I'm seeing in these spaces. And the personal subjective interactions that I'm having with these entities and beings, I think that's something that is I'm trying to understand my place and my role in it.
Hmm.
And you say, how do you bring it full circle? I haven't said this to anybody yet, but what the fuck? I already sound crazy anyway. Um, in one of my last DMT sessions, uh, I, I really feel as though my role is to help translate that realm somehow, some way, and not necessarily like DMT extended state where I'm going and try to map the geography of it, but
Yeah.
I know that I'm welcomed in that space. I get a bunch of information in that space. I'm received with respect and reverence. There's this interaction that goes on back and forth, and I feel somehow, some way, um, I'm gonna be one of the people that takes information from that space and brings it back and puts it in a way where I can. Not to say like I can talk to the little old lady the same way I can talk to the 20-year-old guy, the same way I could talk to the middle-aged mom, but like I feel like I can take the message and package it specifically to the person as opposed to just
Yeah.
with one scientific button or one whatever. Like, uh,
Well, I saw you do this at the retreat. I mean, I saw you go up to people that looked like they were having a hard time or that looked like they were on the periphery of the social group and really make sure that you communicated that you saw them and you saw that they were struggling and you saw like you could feel, you know, them. I guess you could feel their pain to some degree.
yeah, no, you're
And
giving
that,
me goosebumps and
yeah,
almost
no, me
tears in my
too.
eyes because
No,
it's
me
like,
too.
fuck, man, that's something that happens with psychedelics too. Is you become very empathetic and yeah, you feel
Yes.
it.
Yes, absolutely. And that to me shows that what you're talking about. It illustrates what you're talking about more than, more than words. Like the feeling of being around someone who takes the time to do that and acknowledge that and get outside cuz even in these like yeah, it was a beautiful communal space and I felt very connected to those people, but you're still in your own little head. You're thinking about your journeys and your visions and your meditations and to be able to like put that aside and really go up to other people who are struggling like that speaks to exactly what you're talking about. Um
Well, thank you for noticing that because it makes it difficult sometimes. I walked away from 6-figure jobs and all the fancy stuff and all the material wealth that I could have ever imagined to struggling to whatever fucking buy a sandwich. But to know like, and since we've gotten back from Monroe, I've gotten quite a bit of emails and texts from people saying as such that you really helped, and that's that's not my message. I guess that's the beauty of it. That's the message that just comes through. Like you become a channel of God, of sauce, and
yeah.
maybe a great way to say just how powerful that was. At the end, you asked, and you were one of the first people to take off. You asked, did anything cool happen when you left?
Oh
And
right, yeah.
anybody that's seen pictures of Monroe knows that there's that huge rose quartz like monolith in the yard there, and we all there was 5 of us, and we put our hands around that stone, and one person, the opera singer there, was able to channel some amazing vibrations through that, and then another person there who was very energetically charged was able to basically just impart her energy onto that stone, and we sat there with our hands around it, vibrating, full of tears, shaking, and it's like
Wow.
it's real. Like, it's not fake shit, and it's like I left there having 24 people say that they loved me. And from
Yeah.
somebody that not only I didn't love myself for many, many years, but I wanted to take out not only myself, but I wanted to destroy society. Like I was gonna fucking blow this place up. Um, I don't, and you didn't see me with my shirt up, but I'm full of nasty fucking tattoos too. And across my heart in big bold letters, it says "fuck love," but it's
Wow.
backwards. So when I look in the mirror, like when I brush my teeth at night, every night I have that, and I haven't altered it or removed it because I want to know that I always remember that period in my life. So to leave that place, knowing that I had 25 people come up to me and heartfelt say that they love me, and not just like a, oh yeah, we spent a week like like a true one-on-one, Adam, I love you, thank you. Um, that was something that I did not think I was going to take away from that experience, was that group mentality. But it really does give credence to the message I'm giving in the last chapter of my book. Is called Love Thy Neighbor, because it ends with that. Like it's that simple. To learn to know yourself, to love yourself, and then to love your neighbor, and then to come together as a cohesive group like that, is really powerful. And I think that's important for people that either don't have access to DMT or don't have access to the Monroe Institute. It's important to know that you're not alone on this struggle or this journey. And for everybody that I've known that has done DMT, it falls in their lap somehow, some way, exactly how they need it when they need it. So like that'll happen if you're looking to have DMT done. If you're, yeah, I get the point of that though is just there are other people there that you can lean on, that that you're not in this alone, and the power of connection and love is truly transformational.
Yeah.
Like it,
Yeah, we're back on that topic now of love, and outside of the hallmark cliche materialistic reductive way that we think about it, there is this profound esoteric hidden kind of love that is only hidden because it is so pervasive. Like, it is one of those things where when you really reflect on the more esoteric ideas of what it is, like, so the Greeks would call it eros, or they would call it philos, that there is this interconnecting tapestry, coherence, sense that is just interpenetrating all of reality at all times, that you will very quickly logically have to acknowledge, right? Like, when you think about the coherence of reality, the laws of physics, the fact that we exist at all, the fact that there is this underlying logos, as the ancients would have called it, this sensicality to everything, that is love. And that's a kind of love that, like, you can never be apart from, that you are, that is all throughout you and everything, no matter what you do, no matter what things you've done in your past. You're being, like, projected out of those fibers all the time. And I mean, you can't, there's no way I can fully explain it, and I'm not saying I fully understand it, but just to show you how deep this idea goes, there's this whole Platonic dialogue, the Symposium, where they're talking about, you know, what is love, what is beauty, like, what are these things really, on the deepest, most archetypal Platonic form kind of idea. And this is like that I'm going, this is the direction that Socrates eventually goes when it's his turn to talk. But he makes it clear that it goes even deeper than this, and that he learned this from this female priestess named Diotima. And she basically tells him, you're not even ready for, like, the deepest levels of the answer to this question of, like, what love is, what beauty is. But here's what I can tell you. And she kind of goes on a similar riff to what I just did about the actual nature of eros, is this like this interconnecting force that holds reality together, um and is this sort of like mediating quality matrix that sort of everything sprouts out of. um but it goes even deeper than that, because you can have these experiences that, again, evade language, right? Like, that you can't, where you're so overwhelmed, again, in this kind of like face melting, concept annihilating way. And I really think if you deeply reflect on that, sort of just like hyper negating force, that you will come to the conclusion that that is love. It's not, it's so strange, because it's like it melts concepts, but at the same time it's a kind of goodness that is, like, immortal and behind everything, and is available for you to experience under the right circumstances. And the idea that we might just go back into that, or that we come from that, is insane. It's insane, but it's,
That's kind of what all the religions and ancient
yeah.
wisdoms teach. You know, you mentioned, I got it here, the book that I was reading while we were there, Edidorfa, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I wanted to talk
any
about
of your
this.
listeners, that awesome book. But so the whole point of that, right? And it's a cult classic from like the 1800s, but it's about this guy that goes into the depths of the planet, and you know, at this metaphorical and literal kind of travels and journeys that happen. But that Edidorfa is Aphrodite spelled backwards,
Yeah.
and like
Mhm.
kind of the play on it is, it all comes down to love. You know, and it's this awesome esoterically loaded book with all Freemason symbols and stuff like that. But to your point, it all kind of comes back to that same concept. And yeah, it's a very, you know, anytime you use language, it's such a way of dumbing it down. But yeah, the essence of that, whatever that is that unifying, beautiful source that we are part of. We are one and the same of that. We are a facet
Mhm.
of that source. And uh again, to recognize and to remember that we are part of the divine and that we do have magic is that's real. I don't want to say like that's it, that, but until you kind of realize that, you're going to be struggling against almost everything. And then when you do realize that, all the struggles kind of are put into perspective, where you're not looking for any specific outcomes. You're really just like, looking for whatever that experience may be.
Mhm.
uh
Yeah. What do you I mean, obviously it's impossible to really, speaking of limits of language and limits of concept, I understand that it's impossible to really answer this question fully. I mean, you might as well be talking about something as all encompassing as what we were just talking about. But when it comes to like an entity experience or like really seeing these hyperdimensional realities that you can, and even seeing isn't the right word, experiencing these hyperdimensional realities that you can on a requisite dose. Um, you mentioned that you feel loved and welcomed at least most of the time in those experiences. I'm guessing with the amount of times you've done it, maybe you've had some experiences not like that.
yeah.
But how does that come across in those kind of spaces? Like this concept that we're talking about, because it seems like you're alluding to this idea that it's there, like, and you feel a hyper download of love a lot of the time when you're in these hyperdimensional spaces that I think a lot of people are afraid of
So I think
going
this is
to.
where the idea of like the archetypes and the kind of
Yeah.
collective conscious, a lot of times, so the common terms, machine elves or jesters,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be unique for everybody, but I think that there is a like ambiance and a feel to the types of energies that projected. So when I say I feel love and welcomed, that can come in a lot of different ways. So there is that gestury fun, like amusement park type energies where it is all flashy lights and they're going around, kicking you in the butt and you're doing all this fun stuff. There is the archetypal, female energies. Some of them are sexual and some of them are more like motherly. There is the not controlling, but like the mentor guide male type energy. So a lot of times there's these just overall feelings. I don't necessarily see like I always see Frank with a green hat, or there's always the lady with the purple dress. It's more these constantly like morphing, moving kind of shapes and blobs or whatever. Um, but there are very distinct categories. Like I was asked the other day if I've ever had any like mantis interactions.
Hmm.
That seems to be like a insectoid type thing, and I have. And the theme with that seems to be they go in and show me how to properly use my human body. So a lot of
Mm.
times, you just talk about like how do you interact with them? Do you talk to them? Do you feel like sometimes they truly like absorb into your body and they'll show you how to vibrate properly, how to pulse your blood properly, how to breathe
Everyone's going to
properly.
tell you that
Um,
you're being possessed by demons right now in the comments, by the way.
yeah, I've already whatever, fuck them. They're good demons, but no, really.
Yeah, look into the etymology of the word demon, by the way, for
But
all
come
of
in
you.
and it's almost like they're coming in and showing me how to use my human body to its full
Yeah.
potential. Like, look at how amazing this is. You like almost you have no idea how fantastic this machine is. Let me show you how to play. And they'll come in and control you and show you how to operate your body. Um, I've had interactions where, and I think this is where the common sometimes common stories with alien abductions can also be, I think, maybe similar, whether it be endogenous DMT or what. But I've had a lot of experiences where I felt as though I was being examined, where I would go up into the space and it was almost like I was like an animal in a zoo, or if I was a firefly in a field and I was flashing. Where as soon as they saw me go into this space, they kind of like flocked towards me. They're like,
Hmm.
oh shit,
Hmm.
like Adam's here, and really interested in doing an analysis of me. Um, I've had experiences where I felt as though my future self interacted with me, which is again, how do you explain
Mm.
that? It wasn't me with a longer beard or like an older human.
Yeah.
It was just this very distinct, comfortable. This is me. That like I was here to do a diagnostic check on myself, and um, kind of it was very clear, like coming in to just say, hey, you're on track, done a good job. I have had, and this is where I was saying about, I think maybe, and I can't say this with a straight face, that I'm going to play a role in translating DMT entities to the human race. But in the last month and a half or so, I've had two interactions where I would say all of the other interactions where you're getting this DNA upload, or you're getting this information come in, or you feel as though your senses are getting increased, I would compare that to like a software upgrade. I've had two things happen recently where I would consider they were like hardware upgrades, where I
Hmm.
truly felt as though I had something hold me down, make it so I couldn't move, and something was, I don't know, necessarily like inserted in my body, but I was held against my will in this kind of blue jelly space with
Wow.
no entities, no visions, no things, but I was just held in this vibratory hum of blue. And um like, I don't know, weird shit was happening to my body.
Where'd they
And
put it?
it actually, it went up through my, so, and the fact that I like it went up through the bottom of my feet, went
Wow.
up through my head, and then came out through the bottom of my feet, almost like a laser scanner.
Wow.
Um, and
And is there anything that you feel like that yielded? Like where you're like, I don't feel like I had this capacity before that, or is it more nebulous?
so I guess, well, during the experience, one thing I wanted to say that was different from all the other ones is complete lack of your body senses. So like I
Hmm.
I talk about sex on DMT and doing all these cool like art projects and stuff like that. So normally you have more sensory inputs. This particular case, it really was, I had none. It was just like almost like a sleep paralysis type, where I was just there.
Mm. Mm.
Coming on, but I felt no negative intentions. I felt nothing bad. And I don't know if I'm just saying this to kind of convince myself or to make myself feel better, but I truly felt as though when I came out of that it was an upgrade. Like I got like a stronger immune system, skeletal system, nervous system. I mean, it sounds foolish, but even like going to the gym like the next day, like I felt stronger. I felt as though
Yeah.
I got like an upgrade. So I don't know if it was, a marker that it means I can make it to the next step, or if I've got a something. But now it's happened again where I've had that same kind of feeling, but it was that something was here to tell me that, hey, we're here to kind of communicate with you, and almost apologize for scaring the shit out of me last time. Like they were like, listen, we knew we kind of scared you, but we had to do something. Like we
Wow.
had to impart whatever. I don't know. Is it an antenna? Is it an upgrade? Is it whatever? But
It's
again, they
so
keep changing over
interesting.
the hundreds of times. So how do you put that? How do you put that in perspective? I have no idea.
Well, speaking of putting things into perspective, have you read the Monroe books yet?
Like from Robert Monroe himself?
Yeah, yeah.
No.
Oh, dude. Okay. So the first book is Journeys Out of the Body. The second book is Far Journeys, I believe. In Far Journeys, he describes some very similar things to what you're talking about. And this idea of being, scared by what feel like higher beings, but then also accepting like I want to know so bad what you can show me that I'm willing to like pay whatever price it is. And then having very similar experiences after that to like what you're describing. So it's really compelling to me to hear very archetypally similar experiences through different methods. So for people who are just convinced for whatever, brainwashed reason that like, oh, if this has something to do with a super psychoactive molecule, it's not real. It's the brain on drugs, some version of that. Well, guess what? You can do it without it too. Like if you believe, I guess you could just say you don't believe Robert Monroe or that he's dreaming or tripping out. There's always some way that intellect can intervene. And I don't want to sound like you shouldn't be skeptical. You should be skeptical, but you should also suspend judgment on other people's experiences first of all, and suspend final opinions until you've done exhaustive experimentation of your own. Like it's just I was going to say apply the scientific method, but I understand that it's fundamentally not scientific to have an experience in your own umwelt of consciousness. But the idea that it's not valuable because you can't yield an empirical, you know, replicable data set is insane. and that's to be brainwashed by this like scientific reductive way of viewing reality to a really unhealthy degree.
Yeah, and I think even the most humble of scientists, or they no one knows or claims that they have the exact answer. They have theories, and they're trying to
Yeah,
understand it. Um, but I think the like I said, the fact that there's something beyond our normal five senses, I think that's been proven a long
I
time
do
ago,
too.
and now it's just a matter of exploring that.
Yeah, dude.
Whether we get the actual answers or not. I not to say that it doesn't matter, but that's not necessarily what I'm interested in. I'm interested in. I mean, this past week, I've gotten several emails saying how this helped me, how this helped, how this helped. Like, um, this changed my life, Adam. This saved my life. It's and I'm just some small time guy getting some random
Yeah.
emails here and there coming in, and it's really really empowering because I know that words can have that much effect, and it's I really feel like we're all on this right path, and whether it be DMT, shrooms, and psychedelics, whether it be meditation and yoga, whether it be walks in the woods, cold plunges, whatever, like the information that people are gaining in these altered and elevated states of consciousness, there's valid and valuable information that can save lives and truly, again, not to fluff it up, but really bring us to the next level of human evolution. And I wanted to come, we were talking about like the plaque thing. It's almost like either that has to happen or there's going to be some sort of speciation event where there'll be, yeah, the Homo sapiens, and then there'll be the whatever, like Homo enlightened or the Homo like spiritualis, or like something where like there can't be that much of a difference between human species where somebody can just clearly throw a bag of shit of McDonald's on the side of the road. And for anybody that's like, oh, that's not a big deal, then you're the piece of shit. Like, then you need to check yourself if you
Yeah.
think just throwing a
Yeah.
bag of McDonald's out the window is okay. Because to your point, it just shows such a lack of respect of the earth, the planet, the streets, all the people that clean the streets, your neighbors, the school children that have to step over your shit. I mean, it just if you can't see how that is a disrespectful thing to yourself, then I don't know.
It's like there's, it's almost sometimes when I try to conceptualize these really just beyond the individual sorts of archetypal phenomena going on in the collective conscious and collective unconscious, or however you want to explain. The only thing I can think of as a similar corollary is like weather systems or something. Like there are these qualities, these pressures, these um predispositions that are moving through us, through the zeitgeist collectively. And it's weird because in some ways they're way beyond what any of us can do as individuals. Yet it's like an input output thing. It's like there is input and there is output from the individual. Like the individual is a victim, if you want to think of it, of the collective, but they're also feedbacking into the collective. And there's got to be some kind of forceful event that puts a lot of positive feedback into the ether, or we're not going to get this weather system under control. Like it's going to continue. Like the plaque is just going to keep building up. We're going to feel more disconnected from our souls. We're going to feel more like there's, disconnected from all these ideas we're talking about. And personally, I don't really know how to do that other than what feels authentic for me, and that's blabbering into a microphone a bunch. And I don't want to make it seem like I have some super high-minded idea, like that's what I'm doing by doing a podcast. But I don't know. It's truly like, if nothing else, it's like coping for me. It's like
It's therapy.
yeah, it's like I feel that soul sickness, and I don't know what to do about it, but I have to do something. And I certainly can't just keep going through the motions of like a job and then do all the stuff, like check all the boxes of, you know, Western capitalistic reality, and that should fix it. Like I knew from a young age that that was not going to work for me. And of course, you have to play that game to some degree. And I did play that game, and I do play that game to some degree. But to leave it at that feels profoundly not just inadequate, but wrong. you
Yeah.
know, and I think we're under construction of how that's done. But it's like, you know, to try to end this on some kind of a like positive note, it's like you see the seeds of the things that could shift that energy. You know, conversations like this maybe are a little bit psychedelics and some of these ancient philosophies and practices and introspective methods. I think those were a huge part potentially, but I don't know how we wrap it all into something that people can easily get behind and understand. And maybe it shouldn't be easy. I don't know, but
Maybe you just lead by example. I think that's treat others how you want to be treated. You start showing
yeah.
yourself love and respect, and it, like I said, it becomes easier to show that towards other people. Hopefully, this would be a maybe a good point too to make sure we distinguish, especially a lot of people that are studying esoteric stuff like this and
Mhm, mhm,
the consciousness. There's, I think, a tendency to, and you said how like I seek and I seek often, and I'm definitely, I consider myself a seeker, but with the knowledge of knowing I'm not trying to seek to leave this body, or even the phrase of Monroe is we're more than our physical body.
mhm.
Um, every time I would say that as part of our prayer, which we did through every meditation, I was always say we're more than our physical bodies. And I think I said this in one of the debriefs, but man, my physical body's fucking beautiful. Man, I love my physical body. My physical body's so great, so beautiful, and not like I'm saying my physical, like the look
Mhm.
of my body, but I think it's important for people not to try to ascend the 3D to the 5D, not to try to get out of this dumbed down meat suit and get into this ethereal spiritual plane where you're ascended, you never have to reincarnate, you found your home planet, you're back to your alien home. Like, in my opinion, that's
Yeah.
not the role or the goal of any of this. The
Yeah, that's stinks of spiritual bypassing for sure.
Well, the point is to ascend to these higher levels, to ascend to these different levels of consciousness, to absorb the lessons, but then take them back to this 3D world. Take it back to where we are time and space limited, because that's where we can explore, or excuse me, where we can enjoy, like I said, the cup of coffee or the ice cream or the beautiful woman or the walk in the woods. And I think that's really important, because I think a lot of these other, whether you're talking about ghosts or spirits or even DMT entities, I don't think they can collapse down to our
Right.
load 3D space. I don't think that form can take it. Where we know with certain practice that we can ascend to their levels, and I think that's really important to know that we, as the not the dumbed down meat suit, but truly as the beautiful human divine body, to appreciate it as such, because you can have both the divine enlightened as well as the biological, physical body, where I think those other beings can't have that. And
Yeah.
you forget about that. That's when you forget about how nice it feels for the warm sheets and the new socks and all of that type of, like, truly the every sensation becomes something that you appreciate as opposed to frown upon.
Right, right. And that's why I'm not a big fan of this like essentially like gnostic matrix ascension sort of disposition that dismisses the lower world as this like this evil, you know, prison
No,
reality constructed
no,
by
it's a
some
school.
kind of malevolent god. And I don't know what it is. Like I would love to believe that it's a school or that it's like everything here is happening for a very specific reason or a selected reason. But I guess where my gut goes is that it's this sort of like midpoint where we've talked around so many ideas and experiences and studies that point to there being more than this physical reality, than you being more than your physical body. But to a degree, and to your point, that is what you are. And that thing is going to break down. It's going to get old. It's going to, you know, I'm getting gray hairs. You're getting gray hairs.
Had them for a
Like,
while.
like, yeah, that's all happening. But that doesn't mean it's not precious. You know, it's that doesn't like like even if it's something. So one of the ideas that really blew my mind, and this was the idea of I was bringing up with DMT being like a a symbol of something. So the Greek words are symbolon or synthema, that it's like this distillation, this symbol of some kind of sacred reality or divinity or whatever. And reading this book, Theurgy and the Soul, by this religious scholar and this guy who studied Platonism for his whole academic career, Gregory Shaw, he communicates this idea that really blew my mind, which is that your body is a synthema of your soul. Like your
Hmm.
body is a symbol of your soul.
Oh, I like that.
So why would you ever try to
Mhm.
insult or besmirch or destroy that thing? Like, yeah, it's like maybe a car is a good adage, like care for your car. Your car is great. It's carrying you around. It's like it's an extension of you in a certain way, but it's also not you. Like you're also a lot more than your car, and you're also a lot more than your body, right? It's
Well, and
I don't, yeah,
can I play on that analogy too?
of
Because I
course.
think it's important with psychedelics where, if you have the indicator lights on your car, so you want to know if you're low on gas or if your tires are low or if you're getting ready to overheat, where I think so many people um, don't listen to the indicator lights of their own body. So
Yeah,
they'll
yeah.
once again mask it with prescription pills or alcohol. And instead of listening to these indicator lights, they're just putting pieces of tape over them. And I know that's what I did for a long, long time in my life, where I didn't want to hear it. So stresses can be a good thing because they're showing you areas of your life that need adjustment or need correcting. And now I look at that analogy where my control panel for my quote unquote car has 100 dials or 1,000 dials where I don't want to limit that or dumb it down, or I don't want to see any lights. Oh shit, that's scary. I want to see everything. So now I know if I'm getting a minor headache, well, maybe I'm dehydrated. Was I out in the sun too long? If my feet start to hurt, I loosen up my shoes. If like you actually listen to your body and you become connected with it, and again, that's part of loving it. But yeah, you don't appreciate when those indicator lights go off. Appreciate when you're getting stressed. Like, if you think your job sucks and your wife sucks and you never wanted to be a dad or you never wanted to be a mom, or like, I hate to say it, that maybe you need some life changes. But
Yeah.
like, don't just you know oh no, she's not cheating on me. Yeah, she's been cheating on you for the last 15 years. Like, maybe it's a shitty example. People definitely don't want to hear that. But like, at what point do you realize, like, oh yeah, I got to change my own shit in my own life? But
Yeah.
you only know if you're paying attention to those indicator lights. And a practical example, I mean, you saw the Audi that I showed up on. So it's
Mhm,
like the one
mhm.
remaining thing that I have in my past life. That's nice. But the indicator light for the coolant came on the other day, and so instead of getting pissed or getting mad or flipping out, or this is going to cost me money, or like, I calmly was like, all right, this is great. I was just in Boston the night before. I'm glad it didn't happen then. Let me check on it. Long story short, it was just the cap from the last guy that checked it wasn't fully on, so some had come out through pressure. I had to fill it, and everything's all good. But if I didn't have that indicator light, I would have overheated and blew up my engine and would have destroyed, a beautiful sports car, and then had nothing. Like, then I really would have been asked out. But it's
Right.
very, very similar to me running on, overheating with alcohol and stress and anxiety before, where I almost, ran it off the cliff. And people, I think, need to really lean into getting more indicator lights on their panel, doing that shadow work, doing the hard part, knowing that the light and the dark and the whatever, like, it's all same ends of the same spectrum. And I know that, like, all the low lows that I've had, now I can appreciate the high highs that I know I'm going to have. And I wouldn't have avoided those, or I wouldn't change, any of that for anything. But people, it's maybe tough when people are going through the dark soul of their journey, or if they're really in a really hard spot. It's gonna be tough to hear, but I can honestly say, like, good for you. Like, I'm so fucking happy for you. Like, if you're on the verge of snapping, if you're on the verge of breaking, if you're sitting there being like, you know what, I'm fucking done. I feel for you. I'd love to give you a hug and whatever, to let you know that I'm here for you, and I'll do those things. But the truth of it is you've made it this far, and you're right there. You're right ready to have that phoenix rebirth. You're right ready to have that hero's journey. You're ready to, like I did, burn everything to the ground. So now I have a fertile field to just throw all these beautiful seeds. And it's really, really tough when people are going through that. But the light on the other side is worth it. And that's kind of been my message that I can hopefully try to share with people is just get through it. Like, just keep walking through and truly throw up the middle finger to those demons and those devils and those monsters that are jumping on your back. And that's probably the most empowering thing that's happened through all of this is I was able to look at those monsters that truly were there to suck my life away. And I looked at them. I took ownership. I called them by name. I said, fuck you. You don't have control over me. And I know that that's my own demons and my own enemies and my own inner psyche is my own worst enemy and is probably the only thing in this world that can truly destroy me. And now that I've faced those aspects of myself, I am not afraid of any situation or any man. My experience with my future self, I don't have any fear of death. I'm very comfortable that my energy will transmute onto the next stage, whenever that may be. But having all of those realizations happen wasn't easy. But I also use the analogy of coming out with like Girl Scout or Boy Scout badges, where you've got that sash, and the most difficult ones are just that. They're the most difficult ones. Where my sash is full of badass fucking badges. Like I've gotten like the Eagle Scout type shit, and then like the pluses because the stuff that I've battled through. But now that gives me the courage and the confidence to bear some of that weight or those darkness for other people. To say, all right, you need help with your monsters, I'll go in that space with you and I'll kick their ass. Or to know that maybe I have the power to share my love when somebody needed it. And yeah, it's to take ownership of that aspect of your life puts everything else in perspective. Because again, you're not worried about a job or a relationship or anything, because you know where the source of your power comes from, and it's you.
Yeah. Amen, brother. There's no better note to end it on than that. This has been a lovely mind meld, an empowering mind meld, I hope. And I'm sure we can do many more.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for the opportunity to share my message. And I say this sincerely. Thank you for your friendship. I said this when we were at Monroe, but I really did manifest. I wanted to go there. I wanted the two teachers that we had, and I knew that you were going through a couple of like mutual fans or friends, and I was just like, I'm gonna hook up with Michael, and we're gonna become friends, and we're gonna fucking do some shit. And I appreciate the time and energy that you spent with me. I appreciate that I witnessed an aspect of something in your life that was profound for you, and that I was there to see, which is you coming out being like, oh shit. Yeah. So no, I appreciate the fact that our paths cross, and I think what you're doing, you kind of not brushed it off, but what you are doing is extremely important. I think the voice that you're giving to this type of information and knowledge, and putting it in a way that's digestible for people, is what they need. They don't need more social media smut or mass media stuff shoved down their throat. They need exposure to these types of information. So thank you for doing what you do, and man, let's keep fucking doing it. And let's go to Monroe again. So I was looking at the 2025 thing. They have a couple cool ones. I don't know if I can make it maybe this year, depending on how things go. But
yeah,
there's definitely a couple cool ones, like internal medicine ones, and like how to really use your physiology. And
the guidance one is the one. Is it called guidance? I think it might be guidance.
I don't know. I was just looking at it, but yeah, I'd love to try to figure out that one. Get back there.
The conversation will continue offline. Much love, everybody. And much love to you, my friend. It's been awesome getting to know you, and you are an awesome roommate, by the way. All of the like, first of all, just having you to talk to, like to be the first person to talk to, that was perfect, because we have such like a shared like understanding of the world, right?
Yeah, we held space for one another, similar to psychedelics. Yeah. Really, it was hot. Let's hold space and let that person feel comfortable.
But also he was very quiet. Doesn't snore, doesn't, yeah. I made a bigger mess in the room than he did. So yeah. All right, brother. Let's well,
on love. I love you, and thank you for sharing it with me.
Love you too, man. Before we verge too heavily on oversharing,
yeah,
I'll hit stop.